So this took a bit of investigating. Like I said, it's just something I hadn't really thought of. But the question that was asked in class the other day about why the half isn't integrated separately. So we integrate things with respect to x. So the thing has to be changing with respect to x. So you know when you start algebra and you learn about like a number like 3x or a term like 3x. So as x changes, 3x changes, because depending on the value we put in for x, we get a different value for 3x. So that term changes with respect to x. But something like a half or 6 or 8 won't change with respect to x because there is no x on it, okay? So if we look at this sum here, we have sine 3x. Sine 3x is one term, it's a single term, and sine 3x has an x in it, which means it will change with respect to x, so we can differentiate it. So, sorry, I still don't know my integrals. I'm just getting the maths tables here. Integration. So sine is minus cos, so it's going to be minus cos 3x over 3, and then cos is sine, so that's going to be plus sine 4x over 4, and it's an indefinite integral, so plus c. So both of these, both the sine 3x and the cos 3x, have x's in them, which means they contain variables, which means they will change as x changes. So the value of sine 3x will change depending on the value of x, and the value of cos 4x will change depending on the value of x. So they change with respect to x. Yeah? Now, over here. So the half and the 3x are not separated by a plus or a minus. Yeah? So the half is part of the term. So this is a single term, just like a term like 2x squared or, I don't know, 3x or whatever, where the half is simply just a coefficient on the term. It isn't a separate term. And then because it's a constant, it is not going to change with respect to x. So as x changes, it's not going to change. So we don't integrate it separately because it's not separate. In the exact same way that if you were integrating this, you would get 2x cubed over 3. The 2 is part of the final answer, but it didn't get integrated separately because it isn't separate. It's the exact same thing here. So in practice, because it makes the maths easier, we take the half outside and then we integrate sine 3x with respect to x. So that becomes minus cos 3x over 3, and then just like we did up here, the half has to become part of the answer, so it's minus cos 3x over 6 plus c. Okay, we could do the exact same thing with this one. You could take the 2 out, integrate the x squared to get x cubed over 3, and then combine them again to get 2x cubed over 3. Yeah? So the reason it's not integrated separately is because it's not like this. It's not two terms separated. Actually, I could probably have a better example of that. Like if we had an integral of 2x cubed plus 6x squared plus 8x plus 4 with respect to x, then you would integrate them all separately. So it would be 2x to the 4 over 4 plus 6x cubed over 3 plus 8x squared over 2. The 4 is completely separate, so you would have to integrate it, and then you have your plus c at the end. Yeah? And then we'd also have an issue if you had, so I'm trying to address kind of all the issues here. So it is not separated by a plus or a minus, so it's not its own term. It is just a coefficient, so that's why it's not separate. Also, the fact that it's a constant coefficient is why it's not separate. Like if it was something like this that we were integrating, like 2x sine x, that's different because this is a this is not a coefficient. It's its own term. with an x on it, which would change with respect to x. Do you know what I mean? So that would be like obviously a product rule, but we don't have a product rule in integration. So that would be done using a process called integration by parts. But integration by parts is not on the course anymore. So you're not going to be asked a question like that. Yeah? So the reason the half doesn't get integrated separately is because there isn't a plus or a minus separating it, which means it's essentially a coefficient. And also because it's a constant, it's a coefficient. So it's exactly the same as having 2x squared or something like that. If that was a half x, we'd be into this situation down here. Or if it was separated with a plus or a minus, we'd be into the situation where it has to be integrated separately because it's very clearly being indicated as being its own term. Here, it's not its own term, it's just a coefficient. Okay? Hope that clears it up.